The United States opens its ships to combat the Houthis, and Houthi missiles target American F-16 fighters for the second time, and an urgent meeting to contain the disaster. The UAE paves the way for the Aden government to normalize with Tel Aviv. Netanyahu announces his army's readiness to return to war. Zero-hour day. Washington opens the hotline with Qatar and Egypt to save the agreement, and Netanyahu announces it. Iran has come close to making its first nuclear bomb, while the Hebrew army is expanding in Syria and declares the annexation of new lands. Tel Aviv forces refuse to withdraw from southern Lebanon until further notice. Tel Aviv sends a final message to Hassan Nasrallah before his burial. As for NATO, it plans to deploy 30,000 troops in Ukraine. Zelenskyy announces stepping down from the Ukrainian presidency, and Putin defends Trump and announces control over new Ukrainian cities. For an unclear reason, Trump relieves the chief of the general staff from his position. The drums of war sound again. If you deceive me once, shame on you. If you deceive me twice, the shame is on me. This saying, my son, is by the leader of the Ansar Allah movement, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, with his own ideology on war, relying on a single logic, which is that the only peace that can happen is the one that comes from. The American naval leadership issued new statements, published by Reuters, which spoke about the scale of losses and unprecedented pressures imposed by the Ansar Allah movement, the Houthis, on American fleets in the Red Sea. In a challenge, Admiral Lisa Franchetti revealed, the U.S. Chief of Naval Operations, about receiving American aircraft carriers. The Army received tremendous strikes from the Houthis in the Red Sea. It was clarified that the Houthis have forced the forces, the American fleets, to deploy 26 warships continuously over a period of 15 months in confrontations described as the fiercest, according to her statement. This, and as the American political developments revealed the repercussions of this confrontation, where the administration was forced, the United States of America moved to dismiss several of its military commanders due to their failure in confronting terrorist actions. The sudden Houthi attacks, which have turned the Red Sea into a testing ground for the capabilities of local forces against the American alliance. And here is the source speaking to you. In a related context, American intelligence reports, citing Fox News, revealed an unprecedented qualitative escalation in the capabilities of the Houthis after they launched advanced surface-to-air missiles for the first time at an F-16 fighter jet belonging to the U.S. Navy, which was flying off the Japanese coast in the Red Sea. In a step that struck. This is considered a notable development in the deterrent strategy of the Houthi movement. Additionally, media sources confirmed. Tunis Post reported that the Houthis carried out 2 separate operations in one day, with the first targeting an F-16 fighter jet and the second an American drone of the model Mi-14, which we published about yesterday on our channel. Watch to find out. According to the source, the operations by the Houthis have stirred controversy within the halls of the Pentagon, where senior officials acknowledged during a meeting that any American military escalation with it against the Houthis would be costly and unproductive, and the next Houthi strike might directly target ships belonging to the American Navy, which could cause devastating losses that are unfavorable. However, the surprise was that the Ansar Allah Houthi movement, they had officially denied it. In this latest attack, it is confirmed that they did not claim responsibility for any attack, leading some analysts to suggest a plan. What the Houthis are doing is alarming. The aim is to ignore the news coming from Washington to work under a veil of secrecy and complete confidentiality. On the opposite side, there are those who have shed the cloak of secrecy and wanted to announce the news on the biggest platforms. Why not let the platform be the port of Aqaba, where the United States Central Command revealed the conduct of an international naval military exercise in the ports of Abbasam, Al-Anman, Biwaba, and the Aqaba north of the Red Sea, with the participation of Coast Guard forces affiliated with the Aden government, led by members of the Emirati naval forces, in what is believed to be a step that reignites the Yemen crisis through unprecedented escalation. The exercise was conducted with the participation of 30 countries under the title of Enhancing Cooperation in Regional Maritime Security. This, an exercise held annually, but the new development is the integration of Aden forces loyal to Saudi Arabia and and the UAE in these maneuvers. A Yemeni military source affiliated with the Aden government, who refused to be named, stated that the aim of this joint maneuver is to integrate Aden forces to participate in military operations alongside Tel Aviv, which will be directly supervised by Washington. Sources suggested that the use of strategic ports overlooking the Red Sea, such as Eilat and Aqaba, the goal of creating a point for launching future operations that may target Yemen, as reported by Hurai. Netanyahu turns the tables, and from the boiling Red Sea to the flames of the sector, where no voice rises above the sound of cheers, the confusion of Netanyahu's government increases day by day, as the Hebrew Prime Minister declared that Tel Aviv is ready to resume fighting in the sector at any moment, vowing to achieve the goals of the war either through negotiations or other means. He added at a graduation ceremony for a batch of officers in the Tel Aviv area that he is ready to return.
The war has raged, and
the Palestinian Sa'ila will not rule in the sector after the end of the war.
Especially when you are the beloved.
According to his statement cited by the BBC, the military force of the movement has been destroyed. But it seems that these statements did not please anyone inside the Knesset, as the rejection this time came from the mouth of the Hebrew left leader Yair Golan, who threatened Netanyahu with opening the gates of hell if he thwarted the ongoing exchange deal with the factions. The head of the Democratic Party said that the Prime Minister violated the exchange agreement by delaying the release of prisoners in the weeks of Palestinians, warning of opening the gates of hell if the deal fails. Meanwhile, U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waddell stated, "Fits." In the same context, his country is working with my partners in Egypt and Qatar to release the remaining detainees, and there may be a continuous extension of the exchange agreement, and the situation will be reviewed next week. He considered that the propaganda of the factions when releasing the prisoners certainly affects the prospects of negotiations. In a closed meeting between Mark Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, and Netanyahu, both parties affirmed the determination of Washington and Tel Aviv to prevent Iran from possessing weapons of mass destruction. Rubio declared that Iran can never be a nuclear power, and this can never happen, emphasizing that Iran is the largest source of determination for instability in the Middle East and the entire world. Before deviating from the script and moving away from Middle Eastern events, the incursion practiced by Tel Aviv into countries formerly known as the Axis of Resistance cannot be hidden, where the Hebrew Prime Minister called for making southern Syria completely demilitarized, considering that Tel Aviv will not allow the forces of the new administration to spread south of the capital Damascus, emphasizing that his government will not tolerate any threat to the Druze community in southern Syria. He noted that his forces will remain stationed in Lebanese locations as well, saying that he expects the army and government in Lebanon to fulfill their commitments under the agreement. In another context, the Tel Aviv army announced its bombardment of the military platforms contain missile platforms in Baalbek and other areas in southern Lebanon. This coincided with the funeral ceremony for the former Secretary General of the Lebanese factions, where it was announced that the party's supporters are continuing on the same path. Then Hebrew Defense Minister Israel Katz intervened and announced that the Hebrew Air Force planes trying. They flew over the skies of Beirut above the funeral of the Secretary General, sending a clear message that whoever threatens to destroy Tel Aviv and attacks it, this will be their end. Zelenskyy throws the last card. No cessatati. No. The Russian-Ukrainian war cannot end without a new surprise. Yes. Yes. Events in the other half of the world are no less tense than what is happening in the Arab region. The Wall Street Journal reported, citing sources in European political circles, that the British and French governments are considering the possibility of deploying about 30,000 soldiers from the peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. The newspaper, citing sources, indicates that Paris and London require the conclusion of a permanent ceasefire agreement to implement this step. After the deployment of the forces, Britain and France intend to rely on American military capabilities to ensure protection for the international forces involved in the mission. The sources also highlighted that it might be used the air defense systems present in Europe to achieve this goal. In this context, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced that he is ready to step down from his position if it means peace in Ukraine. Adding that he could leave in exchange for Ukraine joining NATO. According to Reuters, Zelenskyy said that he wants former President Donald Trump to be a partner for Ukraine and more than just a mediator between Kyiv and Moscow. But it seems that the train of partnership has passed Zelenskyy.
Putin has boarded it and is about to reach the final station. After Russia announced it was achieving all the expected objectives of the military operation, Putin declared that Zelensky's statements towards Trump are incorrect and that he has no right to speak in this manner about leaders. To reinforce Putin's statement, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said,
saying that Putin and Trump are unique presidents, making their conversation promising, adding that Russia will not give up the territories it has controlled whose residents decide to join Russia. Speaking of Trump on the opposite side, we noticed that the American president does not have the time to respond to Zelenskyy as he is busy both domestically and abroad. The Guardian announced in its editorial that American President Donald Trump unexpectedly decided to dismiss General Sekhiu Brown Jr. from the Air Force as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, considering that this decision is marginalizing a combat faction that made its history and its respected officer as part of a campaign to purge the military of leaders who support diversity and culture. Party equity in ranks. The British newspaper clarified that the removal of the general who holds the position of chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff comes 3 months after the Defense Minister Pete Hess, by presenting a plan to rid the military of diversity and inclusion efforts during an interview with him, according to his statement.